What is going on, Chess YouTube? So today on January 19th, 2025, Magnus Carlsen played a bunch of crazy blitz games on the chess.com servers, and today in this video we're looking at the very best one of the bunch. This game is Alireza Firouzja versus Magnus Carlsen from the chess.com servers on January 19th, 2025. All right, here we go. In the game, Alireza is playing as white. He opens 1e4, certainly best by test, and here Magnus, he goes 1c6, the move of Gotham chess, the Caro-Kann Defense. A very interesting choice for today's game. Now we have d4, d5, and how does Alireza want to play this? He actually goes e5, heading for the advanced variation, my personal favorite line against the Caro-Kann, and arguably the strongest and most critical line against Gotham chess's favorite chess opening, that being again the Caro-Kann Defense. And keep in mind, this is a bullet game. Both sides have 1 minute to make all of their moves, and it's shocking how accurate they play despite having 1 minute for, 30, 40, 50 plus moves here. All right, in the game, we have bishop f5 by Magnus, opting to get his bishop outside the pawn chain before going e6 and c5, opting not to go c5 immediately, that being the other main line here for black. So bishop f5 in the game, and now here Alireza, he does go for the short variation, intending knight f3, bishop e2, and short castles. That is again the strongest line here for a white. So knight f3 played in the game, then e6, then bishop e2, and now here is the first real branching point for Carlsen. How does he want to continue? Well, there are a lot of different options. The main lines here include knight d7 and knight e7. However, there are a lot of other tricky ideas. For example, the immediate c5 is playable. That leads to some truly insane lines. And you can also go h6 as played by the GOAT in the game. Now, what is the idea behind h6? Well, actually, it is a multi-purpose move. Here, black may be intending bishop h7 or g5 later in the game. Beyond that, h6 does guarantee that bishop on f5 will stay in the game. Otherwise, white has knight h4 ideas trying to trade it off. And beyond that, black can still go, for example, knight e7 or d7 or queen c7 later, depending on how the game develops. Now here, Alireza, he castles, short castles. That is the main line. And now how does Magnus want to play it? Well, again, you can go, for example, knight e7, knight d7, and so on. But you can also go for the immediate g5, intending g4. That is one of the benefits of this move, h6. Now, in the game, Magnus playing it safe so far. He goes knight e7, perfectly fine. Now, Alireza, there are two main ways to play the short variation as white in the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann Defense. The first way is intending knight d2, knight b3, maybe bishop d2, rook c1, c4, and so on. That is one option. The other option is the immediate c3, intending potentially a pawn storm on the queen side with ideas like a4, a5, b4, and so on. In the game, knight d2 chosen by Alireza. That is arguably the older move and probably roughly as good as c3. Top grandmasters play both of these lines as white against the Caro-Kann. Now here, black has, he's got to have like 7, 8 different good options. Knight d7 is the main line, but you can go c5, h5, c5, a5, bishop h7, g5, bishop g6, knight g6, and so on. There are a million different options. In the game, though, knight d7 chosen by the GOAT. Now here, Alireza, knight b3, he continues developing, very solid. That, of course, is the idea of knight d2. You go knight d2, knight b3, maybe bishop d2, then perhaps ideas like rook c1, c4, a4, and so on. We'll have to wait and see. Now here, Magnus, very important position. The main line for him here arguably is going to be perhaps queen c7, maybe intending g5, a5, and so on. However, instead, he plays a really shocking move. He goes knight to c8, undeveloping his knight. He already spent one tempo going knight e7. Now he's spending a second tempo going knight to c8. This move is very, very strange if you ask me. Now, what is the idea? Well, you are freeing up that e7 square for the light squared bishop. Maybe he wants to go bishop b7, maybe knight b6 later. It's a little bit awkward, but if the GOAT plays it, it must be good, right? All right, here, Alireza, he's worried about knight b6 ideas. Therefore, he goes a4 immediately, and this move is very strong. He is threatening a5, gaining more space on the queen side, and if he can get that in, that would be, just a huge benefit for him. And that pawn would give him a massive space advantage on the queen side. Now, here, Magnus, he knows that. He doesn't want to allow it. Therefore, a5 is the move, immediately blocking that pawn. Now, the alpha 0 A pawns are touching each other. How cute. Now, Alireza continues. Bishop d2. Again, the standard move in this line where you go knight d2, then knight b3, then bishop d2, then perhaps rook c1 or the immediate c4, and so on. It's a very simple but very dangerous way to play as as white. Now, Magnus, he shows the idea of knight to c8. He goes bishop e7. Finally developing his bishop, and he may be ready for short castles. Now, a lot of the time, black doesn't castle on the king side right away in this line. The center is very closed, therefore you don't necessarily have to castle right away. And beyond that, if you castle, you reduce the potential effectiveness of the advanced g5 later in the game. So we'll have to wait and see what he has in mind here. Now, as white, there are a couple of main ways to continue. The first one, as we discussed in this short variation, is either rook c1, then c4, or just c4 right away. Beyond that, white has a second plan where you go knight e1, bishop d3, potentially f4, and so on, gaining space on the king side and going for direct king side play. And interestingly enough, Alireza, he does go for that in this game. Knight e1 played, and I do have to point out, so far, we're already 11 moves in a very complicated line of the Caro-Kann, and both sides have spent like literally 7-8 seconds playing virtually flawlessly here so far in this game. It's amazing how fast and how accurate they play. All right, now here, Magnus, he's got to strike immediately. If you don't strike, white's going to go bishop d3, f4, knight f3, and so on, and get an excellent game. Therefore, here, he goes c5, immediately striking on the queen side. That is a very thematic move in the Caro-Kann, and it's good to see him finally get that move on the board. Now here, Alireza, he's got to find the right response. Do you take on c5 with the pawn, with the knight? Do you go bishop b5? Do you ignore it and do something else? Well, this is a very good time for a puzzle. Go and pause the video right now and try to find the right follow-up for Alireza Firouzja right here in this position. Well, it turns out the right move. By the way, go and smash that YouTube like button. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, here. The right move for white is just going to be d takes c5, immediately capturing that pawn. That is the right way forward. Then if black takes on c5, you insert the check and you are doing excellent. However, white didn't play that in the game. He also didn't go knight takes c5. Instead, he went bishop b5, and this move is a mistake. The king is not under check at all. The eval bar is collapsing, and here, Magnus, he does not miss the opportunity to play the very precise move c4, and now look at that bishop. It is stranded there. It's like someone deserted it on the b5 square. What is it doing? I'm not sure. All right, here, Alireza continues. Knight to c1. The knight was under attack. You must retreat it. Therefore, knight c1 makes a lot of sense. But here, Magnus, he just castles, finally getting his king to safety and getting the knight out of that pin on d7. And here, the GOAT is just in complete control of this game. And again, both sides have wasted 10 to 12 seconds so far. It is just amazing stuff. All right, now here, Alireza, how is he going to fight back on the queen side? There are a few different ideas. Maybe you want to go, for example, knight a2 or knight e2, trying to bring the knight back into the game. Maybe you want to go b3, fighting for counterplay. In the game, knight e2 chosen by Alireza, a decent move. And here, Magnus, he makes a move that would make Ben Finegold himself blush. He goes for the Ben Finegold counterattack with the move f6, opening up the f file, attacking the front of the pawn chain on e5, threatening f takes, d takes, and then knight takes e5. That would give Magnus a one pawn advantage and just a strategically winning position. Therefore, Alireza is going to have to do something. Do you want to take on f6? Probably not, as that would open up the center to black's advantage. Therefore, instead, he does go f4, bolstering his pawn on e5. But even this does not relieve the pressure in the game. Now, I do want to point out, in this position, instead of f4, turns out knight to f3. Developing that knight would have been the right continuation. Instead, f4 chosen in the game, bolstering e5. It makes a lot of sense. That is the move I likely would have played myself in this position. But the problem is Magnus, he can just go knight to a7, hitting the weird bishop on b5. Again, that bishop is trapped, isolated, has nowhere to go. It's got nothing else to do but wait to be captured or go bishop takes d7. Either way, black is going to win the bishop pair. He'll have those two Bs on e7 and f5, and that will give him an even larger advantage potentially. All right, now here, Alireza, how does he want to continue? Well, one idea is bishop takes d7, intending queen takes, then e takes f6. That would be a decent continuation, intending maybe knight f3, knight e5, and so on, and you would stay in the game. Instead, knight g3 chosen by Alireza, putting pressure on that bishop on the f5 square. Now, what is black going to do about it? Well, it turns out ignoring that threat and ignoring the bishop here and just going f takes e5 is the right continuation. F takes e5 is the right move. Ignoring ignoring all the threats. And very importantly, then if white goes knight takes f5, you can recapture with the rook. That would be an excellent idea. Now, instead of that, right here, knight takes b5 chosen by the goat, and this move is a little more problematic. Now here, white, he does not miss the opportunity to take on f5 before black goes f takes e5, opening up the defense of the rook to the bishop. So knight takes f5 chosen in the game immediately, the strongest move by far. And here black has no choice but to capture that knight immediately. Very importantly, if you don't take it, let's say you go knight c7, then white can literally play knight takes g7 or knight takes h6, either of which would be a brilliant move. The point being, if the king takes, you go queen g4 check, hitting the king, the attack continues, and you have a monstrous attack. Therefore, in this position, e takes f5 is forced. You must win back that knight immediately. Now we have a takes b5, then queen b6, a very precise move by the goat. And again, so far, both sides have wasted only about 20 seconds. It is just unbelievable how fast and how accurate these guys are. All right, now here, what is white going to do? It is not easy to find the right continuation. Of course, the pawns on b5 and maybe even more importantly on d4 are under attack. And what do you do? Well, if you go knight f3 or c3, neither of those moves cut it. For example, if you go knight f3, defending d4, the problem with that move is black can just take on e5, then go knight takes e5, and the pawn on d4 is pinned to the king. The same thing happens after c3 here. For example, c3, f takes, and knight takes e5, and again, that pawn on d4 is pinned to the king. You cannot go d takes e5. Therefore, white's going to be in a lot of trouble almost no matter what. Therefore, here, the only good move, it's a shocker, is to go king to h1, sliding your king off this diagonal with the queen. But instead of that, here, Alireza Firouzja, he actually plays the move knight to f3, and this is a critical mistake. Here, black, as discussed, he takes on e5, f takes, and then knight takes e5, taking that free pawn on the e5 square, and again, that pawn is pinned to the king on the g1 square. You can't take there, and it is just an absolute disaster. And by the way, if you take on e5, as Alireza did in the game, knight takes e5, then queen takes d4, wins the pawn, hits the knight, hits the king, you win back the material anyway. So king h1 chosen in the game, then queen takes e5, and get a load of this. The tactical fireworks have subsided, and here in this position, the goat is up 2 pawns on d5 and f5 in this bullet game. Can Alireza hold on? Let's find out. All right, here there are a lot of ways, and I mean a lot, to harass that queen on e5. It's got to go. You can go bishop c3 attacking the queen, bishop f4 attacking the queen, and rook to e1 attacking the queen. Either way, the queen's got to go in the game. Bishop c3 chosen by Alireza, and now we have queen to e6 sliding back with the queen. Of course, there were some other interesting options, but queen e6 chosen in the game. Now, again, Alireza, he's not letting that queen off the hook. Rook to e1, it hits the queen once again, and the bishop behind it via the X-ray attack or the skewer, whatever you want to call it. Now, of course, the queen has to move while maintaining the defense of that bishop. So, queen to f7 chosen in the game, and now here, Alireza, he should just continue maybe, I don't know, queen f3, h3, a waiting move, developing his pieces, not doing too much. Instead, here, Alireza, he goes off the deep end, and he makes a move that would make Gotham Chess himself blush. He plays the move, rook takes c7, giving up the rook on e7 for the bishop, and this move is a critical mistake, but I don't blame him for playing it. It's a bullet game. You're down material anyway. You got 20, 40 seconds left on the clock. I mean, you just go for it in a bullet game. I don't blame him at all. So, rook takes e7 chosen in the game, bada bing, bada boom, bada bang. Rook takes e7, now queen takes, and then queen takes d5. This is part of the idea. You give it the rook for a bishop, you win a pawn, and you maybe get some sort of initiative going against the black king. So, queen f7 chosen in the game, and of course now, if you go for the endgame, you will be down the exchange and a pawn against the greatest endgame player of all time. You cannot do that. That is no bueno, my amigo. So instead, queen to f3 chosen in the game. Now we have a4, the alpha 0 a pawn marching down the board. You gotta love it. h3 gives the king some loft on the h3 square. And now here, Magnus, he does not go a4 immediately, No, he goes f4, gaining more space on the king side. A very strong move. Now, rook to e1 develops the rook, but with the rook no longer on the a file, guarding that a4 pawn, the alpha 0 a pawn, nothing's keeping it in check, and therefore a3 is the move, gaining space. And if you take the pawn, as done in the game, b takes a3. The problem with that, the challenge, is rook takes a3, activates the rook, hits the bishop, and pins the bishop to the queen on the f3 square. It's amazing how in all of his games, Magnus just always seems to get all of his pieces on literally perfect squares. The rook and the queen lining up on the f-file, the rook pinning the bishop on c3 to the queen on f3. What is Alireza going to do? He goes rook d1, trying to defend, trying to make something happen. But here, Magnus, rook to e8. The threat is rook to e3 with the double attack on the queen and the bishop on c3. And here, Alireza, he has a think for a few seconds and he realizes there is literally nothing I can do here. If I go rook to e1, then black takes the rook. The point being, if you take back the rook, black wins the queen. He would literally be up an entire queen in the endgame. Therefore, there is no way to save that bishop. That means black's going to be up an entire rook and a pawn after rook to e3, rook takes c3, and so on. And for that reason, Alireza Firouzja, he resigns on the spot to the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen. Wow, what a game between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen in this crazy chess.com blitz game from January 19th, 2025. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that like button and comment down below what you thought of this game. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, I just covered Gukesh D's round number 2 game from the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. That game was a shocker. Gukesh was playing against, who was it? Vladimir Fedosiv, the Russian grandmaster. He went for a very unusual line, the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Decline, the one where you go for a fast d takes c4 and then b5, trying to hang on to the extra pawn in the spirit of the semi-Slav opening. That game was really wild. So if you want to see that game by Gukesh, his second game ever as a world champion, check out this video right here where, again, I just covered it. I think you guys will love that video. And again, comment down below what you thought of this game, the Gukesh one, and so on. I will be ramping up content. By the way, guys, side tangent, I will be ramping up content significantly in about 2 months. I'm going to be doing a lot more shorts, a lot more live streaming. I'm going to be having a Discord server coming up. I'm going to be getting on different social platforms. I'll be tweeting at all the biggest chess players very soon. So I have some very, very big plans for this channel. I'm getting some other business stuff lined up. I have other YouTube channels that I do, other, entertainment channels and whatnot. So I'm getting them lined up and dialed in. And in about 2 months from now, I'm going to be going crazy with the content for you guys on this chess channel, trying to really blow it up. So stick around for that. And yeah, check out the video right here where I cover, again, Gukesh facing off against Vladimir Fedosiv in round number 2 of the 2025 Tata Steel Tournament. And I'll see you in the next video.